And give me a clue when to unshare it.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the AstroImaging channel. We've been away for like a whole 2 weeks because we were playing hooky. And I don't know if you know, but before the show starts every Sunday, we actually get together because we have to rehearse and make sure that everybody's all set up for the show and things like that. And so we usually practice to make sure that the presenters got the audio and the visual and all this other stuff. And Tolga's got to get everything lined up and all that other cool stuff. Well, this week we didn't do too much of that because Molly bought a new mount up at AIC. And as a result, we had to spend time getting it going and stuff like that. So I hope our show comes off okay today because Molly's got a new mount. And congratulations, Molly. And what we're going to show you right now, Tolga, we got that picture going? This is the four of us at AIC, and that's Eric and Tolga and Alex and Molly up there with Bob Vera in the corner. We had a good time. We talked to a lot of people. We asked them to be on the Astro Imaging show and the Astro Imaging channel. And we got some people to say yes. So we're working on scheduling them up, and we should have a good schedule coming up for us for a little while.
Since people can't click on his face to see, can you put it up on your screen? The picture?
Tolga?
Or Eric just needs to talk so that the screen will switch over to him.
This conversation's going live, you know. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight, Dave Kodama is going to be talking to us about travel astronomy. But I got to tell you how this came about. I've known Dave for a long time. He is the leader of one of the biggest astro imaging groups in the country. Orange County Astronomers have about 800 people, and it's a big, active club. Got a beautiful observing site out in about an hour and a half away from my house and about 2 hours away from them. And they got all sorts of stuff going on down there. And I really admire him. So my original request from Dave when we were up at Big Bear a couple of months back was that he do something, you know, to tell us about how he runs the Astro Imaging Group, what they do, and things like that. Um, but I also know that Dave is a great asset as far as telling us about traveling, you know, and taking pictures while you're traveling, going on eclipse expeditions and other places where you might want to take pictures while you're traveling, to take astrophotos while you're traveling. And that's what he wanted to do. But I did get him to promise to talk a little bit about the Astro Imaging group that he works with down with the Orange County Astronomers. So, are we ready to go ahead and start this show and have Dave come on? Tolga, are we ready for that? Okay, Tolga, for Dave, take over. To share your screen and go on. We'll
Okay.
do whatever you're going to do.
All right. So first I'll talk about the Astro Imaging group. And let me share my screen here. Let's see, wrong one. Okay, can everybody see that?
I don't see that you're sharing your screen. You got the three dots up in the upper right-hand corner?
Yeah.
And then when you click on that, you'll get the white pane in the middle and make sure
yeah. Okay, I didn't finish following through.
and then the blue share. Now you're on.
Okay.
You got it.
Let me clear out some stuff here. Okay, so let me first start with the Orange County Astro Imaging Special Interest Group. And although Alex makes it sound like I'm the leader and all that, but actually it was started quite some time ago by a series of people, and I just happened to be the one that was asked to hold the reins for a while the previous person had some medical issues. So anyway, that's let me just start some background here. The Orange County Astronomers were established way back in 1967. And I don't know the exact membership, but I think we have around 800. We have monthly general meetings at Chapman University in Orange, California. And we generally have a pretty good speaker from places like JPL or Palomar or some of the local observatories. Also from the space industry. We have a permanent observing site of about 20 acres in Riverside County near the border with San Diego County. So we're pretty far south as far as the observing point goes. And then we have these special interest groups that hold separate monthly meetings. We have beginners, for beginning astronomers. And we actually have in that set of meetings a beginning astroimaging lesson. We have the astrophysics guys who like the theoretical aspects of astronomy and meet every month. And then we have our astroimaging group, which is a pretty good sized group. I'm not sure I would say it's huge, and I'm kind of surprised to hear Alex say it's one of the biggest, but because I have no frame of reference. But we do meet monthly, and we do continue going, and I think it's because we have a large membership to get people from, and we have the permanent observing site. Almost any day of the week, you'll find some of us down there doing some imaging. We have a lot of diverse expertise within the club. So, when you want to build an observatory, we have somebody who's experienced in construction. We got mechanical people who can make you an adapter, out of aluminum or something like that. And we have experts in optical, electrical, computers, and networking. So it's a really nice pool to reach into. As I mentioned, we have a beginner's intro class to imaging, which attracts a lot of people. It's pretty easy these days to get into it with a DSLR. So we get a pretty steady stream of new people coming to our meetings. And of course, there's a general interest in the public. Some of it overhyped, but it pulls in people into eclipse photos and meteors and rocket launches, things like that. So, as I said, our permanent site, which is near the town of Anza, which is what we call our site, is a big factor. It has AC power and water, cable internet. We have on-site facilities for cooking, and if you want to sleep overnight, things like that. We have a lot of open pads, large number of permanent observatories, and the site is open to members 24/7. So, and we also have our weather and all sky camera, which I'll put on momentarily. So this is basically from our site right now. Let me refresh it. And that's what we can see. And we have a few frames that show you how things have been going, basically. I think back here was, this morning we had a lot of clouds. So this is an aerial view of our site. The private observatories were meant to be originally down here, but there have been so many new requests that we've started getting observatories at different locations on the site. These are all just open pads, private pads, and other pads up here. And there's actually some stuff off screen up here where you can, there's another set of pads there. Our public pads are here for anyone to use. And then we have our bedroom and kitchen facilities down here. Let's see. So our elevation is 4,300 feet, which is nice because we're often above fog that covers the urban areas and gives us a better sky. Let's see what else. So once a month on the weekend closest to the new moon, we have a star party, but it's not hosted. Everybody's just welcome to come in there at that time. For the AstroImaging SIG meetings, we have meetings very close to the Orange County Airport at a place called the Urban Workshop. They're not related to the Orange County Astronomers, but they're very nice to let us use this large facility for projection and things like that. And so we meet once a month on the first Wednesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. So if you're ever on business in Orange County, let me know, and you're welcome to drop by. We have lots of room, and you can see what we do here. By the way, this urban workshop is what we call a makerspace. So you see facilities there for working on metal or wood or welding and things like that. It's pretty handy if you really want to make custom stuff for your telescope. To support our group, we have a groups.io private group. Used to be a Yahoo group. And we have email reminders of all the upcoming meetings. And then we have upcoming and past meetings listed in a WordPress site, so people can see what's coming up and what has been talked about, including links to some of the slides. So our typical meeting agenda is to recap any special events coming up. We have at least one scheduled speaker or topic, usually coming from an AISIG member. And then we have at the end a show and tell image slideshow for anybody who has images to present. And then we have just kind of networking time after that. And the urban workshop kicks us out before 9, but oftentimes you'll find people talking in the parking lot for a good half an hour afterwards. And attendance varies from 10 to 40, depending on the topic and what else is happening at the time. Some of the past meeting topics you can see here. We try and get somebody within our group to talk about something, then everybody else can find out who knows what. And, so you get a kind of a hint as to who to ask if you have problems with some aspect of astronomy. And so to summarize, let me say that I think the organized regular meetings keep the momentum going. Even if you can't come to every meeting, at least you know what's happening at each meeting. We meet around a well-defined topic each month to introduce a member's expertise to other members. We do the face-to-face networking time because you kind of get parallel communications among everybody in your particular interests. So in that sense, the old-fashioned face-to-face communication supplements what we can do on groups on the internet. And the imaging show and tell, as I mentioned before, it prompts questions and discussions about imaging flow, equipment, software packages, and then you also discover a little bit about what other members are doing, and you can find people with like interests. So some people have asked, well, what about astrophoto contests? And my personal thoughts are that astrophotography covers too broad a field. We don't have enough members to fill narrower categories of astrophotography. And then, of course, we have the problems of who is going to judge and what are the rules and so on. And third, I believe contests promote competition, which is not really good for cooperation or sharing of techniques. It's really a personal journey. And as far as I'm concerned, my competition is with myself. So I haven't exactly resisted adding an astrophoto contest, but because of inertia, we just haven't gone that way. So that's really all I have to say about that. Have we got any questions at this point?
I would like to make a couple of comments. One is
Sure.
I've been to, I guess, just one of the meetings a while back. I went to one, and I found that all these things that Dave's talking about. It's just really amazing to see all the imagers getting together and sharing those ideas and stuff like that. I think it's really cool that the way they do that. That's why I wanted Dave to talk about it. Let's see. There is a question. Um, you got to explain the trophies.
Oh,
They want to know what the trophies are about.
okay. Well, sorry for the distraction. Those are not my trophies. Those are all my wife's trophies. She does a sport called kendo, a Japanese fencing sport. And so she's been doing that longer than I've been doing astronomy. And I've been doing astronomy for a long time. But at the moment, she's actually in Japan trying to get a new rank for kendo.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about traveling and
Okay.
imaging? Okay.
Let me switch over here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about traveling and astrophotography in general. It has turned out that I've fallen into that, and it has kind of shaped the way I do astrophotography. So let me proceed here. I have a lot of kind of varied interests that kind of drive where I go to and why what equipment I take and so on and so forth. And this is my view of life here. It's a giant pinball game. Our parents, put us into our initial trajectory, but we end up bouncing around and all that. And we have a little bit of control when the ball gets down to the flippers. And eventually we just kind of roll out. And that's it. Unless you're Buddhist and believe in resurrection, then you get more balls to play with, I think. My astrophotography kind of goes all over the place, and it doesn't go to what you guys seem to do a lot, which is, the heavy stuff, in my opinion. The deep imaging, the tricolor, the, sequence generator stuff, and all the computer control. I could do that, but I'm really not as interested as doing the short focus, wide field, and then having the equipment to travel to places. So this is kind of an overview of all the different kinds of stuff I've done. And I define astrophotos kind of loosely as basically anything that's in the sky. It might be atmospheric type stuff. It might be rocket launch. It could be conjunctions and meteors and lunar eclipses and comets and solar photography and so on. And I'll do some, I guess, traditional photography. I like to do different things like panoramas. And my astrophotos end up being on any medium, including film, digital stills, video, time lapse, and 360 VR stuff. I started out with film, of course. This was quite some time ago. And so this is my highlights page, which is clickable. So I could show you something like, so this is a panorama from Southern Africa. And let's see. So this is a 5 frame panorama on medium format film that was stitched together. So if you've been to the Southern Hemisphere, you'll notice a lot of things familiar, like the coal sack here, and Ida Carina on the right.
Dave,
Yes,
you said this is film?
this is shot from film. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I-
Okay.
yeah. This was taken in 2004 from Southern Africa. So let me go back here. Let me go on here. I do have an observatory out at the OCA site, but I tend to have a more simplistic system than you guys. I try not to connect a computer to my mount and cameras, and that's partially because it feels like a black hole you can get sucked into easily. But also, I want a setup that can be portableized if I want to. So in this picture here, I've got a 6-inch astrophysics refractor, which stays here. It's too heavy to really take portably. But over here, I have a 4-inch Borg refractor, which I take everywhere. Let me magnify. And so this is what I take everywhere. And I've got a SBIG STV, which is back from the year 2000, and it's a standalone autoguider. So as far as complexity goes, it's relatively isolated, one component from another. By the way, the mountain is a Losmandy Titan. It is go-to, but I use the paddle to go to places, and then the autoguider just works independently. I have a whole bunch of Losmandy mounts, the Titan, the G11, and GM8. GM8 is the smallest one, which I'll take around on car trips typically. I did take it to South America for the eclipse recently, and I'll show you what setup I use there. I also have some small trackers that I might take along also. I like large image sensors, and that's why I still shoot film when I can. I may be the last guy in the club shooting film, and that's been kind of an advantage for me because everybody gave me their leftover film. So I have a lifetime supply left. For travel, I try not to even take a PC. I take a Chromebook, which allows me to read cards from digital cameras and then put them onto hard disk drives. And of course, the Chromebook is great for web access. So I favor transient events because they're kind of challenging. And as you may realize, we can talk all day about planning for something like an eclipse because it's really, really hard to anticipate exactly what's going to happen during the eclipse. Some eclipses are extremely dark so that you actually cannot see the controls on your camera. So, that's the kind of thing that you have to kind of anticipate, and you have one shot at, and if you fail, well, you just learned a new lesson. So that's something we can talk about if somebody's interested in particular. Aurora, there's some planning there and preparation for equipment. I've been to Iceland and to the northern part of Sweden for Aurora. And it's always been, let's see, we went to Iceland in February and Sweden in December. And so that maximizes the dark sky time so that you can see the aurora. And of course, transits were interesting to chase, especially the Venus transit, since you get 2 shots this century. We saw the 2004 one from Zambia in the middle of Southern Africa. And then, of course, the recent one was visible from the United States, but we went to Hawaii so that we could see the entire transit. And I'll try anything. Here's some astrophotography, if you will, from an airplane. Sometimes the airplane ride is smooth enough that you can do that kind of thing. And I was actually hoping for aurora out there. And sometimes you can get lucky. It's hard to tell what's going on, but this is actually a composite of frames from my dash cam. This is a video. This is a meteor that was visible while we were driving in LA, and give you a little rundown there. There goes the meteor. For planning trips, domestically is not that hard to do, of course. You can do your own self-arrangements. The exception, I think, is that when you have a big event like an eclipse, then because individuals can only reserve a room at a hotel maybe a year in advance, by the time you are able to reserve a place, you'll find out that all the rooms have been taken by large travel agencies or other groups that have planned ahead and been able to take, say 40 rooms at a time. And they're able to do that 2 or 3 years in advance. So if you plan to go on such an eclipse, then I recommend trying to hook up at least loosely with an organized group so that at least you can get a hotel room in a place. For foreign travel, I prefer to go with a small specialty tour operator. So if it's an eclipse, it would be an eclipse tour operator. Or if it's an aurora, then it's an aurora tour operator. And generally those tours are, say, in the US or whatever country you live in. But then they should have contracted somebody in the country where the eclipse or event is going to happen. So that's basically how we've done things. I've gone with 2 small tour operators in the United States who for all external eclipse planning. And for the aurora, over the internet, we found a British tour operator who arranged trips in countries like Finland or Sweden. So that's the way we've been doing things. When you go with a small operator, it is possible to request custom extensions before or after the event. So in the case of after the Chile eclipse, there was an organized extension to northern Chile, which we went on, and then we further extended that, got our own car and hung out even longer and took a quick trip into Bolivia ourselves. The thing about travel is that if you're an experienced traveler and you're trying to arrange all these things to click together, I guarantee you something will go wrong. And that's why it's good to go regularly for eclipses with a small tour operator that you know personally. Then you can try and get things working right. The problems will usually be with the subcontractor in the country that you're going to. So there's not too much you can do except to have your own plan B and plan C, and then have lots of patience. And the worst case, of course, is to have bad weather. So my philosophy is to never go on an eclipse or any other kind of astronomical thing without having another reason for going on the trip. I wanted to say something about trying to catch a rocket launch, because they have been becoming more frequent, especially in California, and of course from Florida. There are always launches. Rocket launches, I found out, planning for these are pretty frustrating because it's not a natural event. It's not necessarily going to happen when scheduled. So if there's a delay, it could be an unknown number of days that they delay. SpaceX seems to be doing a pretty good job of launching right on time, and so I try extra hard to go to a SpaceX launch. So if you have a delay, it's probably going to be at least 24 hours. And for me, Vandenberg Air Force Base, where they launch from, is 3 hours away under good traffic conditions. It's kind of right at that point where, it'd be a waste to drive home. So, you might want to plan to take a room for a night and then see what happens. But so far, that hasn't happened to me. I've been lucky. Where to see the launch from is kind of difficult because it takes place over such a long distance that you have quite a choice of places, and it depends what kind of shots you're gonna try and get. And so in the case here, this was about 3 miles from the launch point, and they're launching away from us, but it's from behind hills, so you can't see the rocket sitting on the pad and the initial liftoff. In the case here, I was actually on in Southern California, way at on the coast, and so this is I don't know how far, maybe 75 miles away from the launch point, but from the side you can see some interesting stuff. So that's what I ended up doing on this launch. And so there we go. And this is the big launch in the evening, which is a really nice launch. And it startled a lot of people, enough to cause crashes on the freeway.
How long was the real time on that? About 6 minutes?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're fun to watch. We get a treat in Southern California where we get to see them launching out of
Yeah. Especially when they launch right at sunset. It really is striking.
Yeah, and they get up above where it's still bright up there sometimes, and
Right.
the colors are all different. So that's really cool.
Right. Now, if you're close to the launch pad, like in this case here, you have to be prepared to shoot at a very high angle. It's practically straight overhead. So if you've got like a telephoto lens and camera on a normal tripod, you will not be able to reach the uppermost shot. And so you should be aware of that. It's really surprising how far straight up they go. And in fact, in this case, this was my first launch. As a backup, I had my 15 millimeter fisheye lens just shooting every 3 seconds. That's how I got and made this composite. But I did have a telephoto lens and other camera on a tripod, but that was a complete failure because I didn't realize just how high the rocket went. And the other thing is that if you have fairly good magnification, you're likely to lose the target sometime during the flight. So I recommend putting one of those green dot pistol sights on your camera so that you can reacquire the target if you lose it.
Okay, just a second, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm following along on YouTube, and maybe I'm doing something wrong here, but are you guys seeing the space launch shots, or are you still back on events phenomena planning?
No, I'm watching it too. The last thing we have on here is a slide with
rocket launches. Okay. For
the
some reason,
road atlas.
we're going along. You're not watching on the Hangouts video call. You're watching on YouTube. Okay,
I'm
mine's
watching
not
on
updating.
YouTube. Everyone seems to kind of be stuck on the slide with the maps. I'm not sure why.
Toga.
Do I need to reset something?
Hang on for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. So what's going out live right now? Or somebody comment?
Your picture, Eric's picture is on right now. Okay, we're back to normal. We've seen the rocket.
Okay. So you can see the rockets now? Okay. That's what we've been talking about, guys.
Yeah, you can see my cursor moving around.
Uh, well,
Yeah.
we've got a 15-second delay or
Oh,
so,
okay.
15 to 30. So now I see your little blue dot came in.
Okay. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. This is a backup camera shot with a 15mm fisheye lens, just in case I couldn't get anything. And indeed, I couldn't get anything with my main camera because I couldn't tilt back far enough on my tripod in order to get the target. And so when you are using high magnification, you're likely to lose the target. And so that's why I'm recommending putting one of these green dot pistol sights and using it as a finder so that you can acquire the target again. As I mentioned before, launches are most spectacular just after sunset and on the West Coast. On the East Coast, although I've never done it, I imagine if there's a launch right at dawn, that's the time to see it. The dynamic range of the lighting is a real challenge for the photography. The rocket exhaust is extremely bright. So if you're in a dark sky, it's really hard to get a deep exposure of other things that might be in the sky at the same time. And like I showed for this shot, you don't necessarily have to be close to the launch site. If you get a press pass, you're able to get close to the site the day before to see the rocket standing there. In the case of Vandenberg, it's about a quarter mile away at this point. But and you're invited to put a camera here, but you can't stay with it. So it has to be a remotely triggered camera. Radio is not good. So a lot of people use sound to trigger the camera. And, you have to be aware that it gets foggy and very damp out there. So you have to protect your camera. You have to be prepared with enough battery power that, if they have a launch delay of 24 hours, then, it has to live that long because you won't be allowed to go out to the site to service your camera.
And can I mention about the sound? That
Oh,
if you are within 3 miles of there, you have to wear hearing protection. It is just I've been about 3 miles away from this site, I think 2 miles, maybe 3, whatever, and it's just incredibly loud, incredibly bright.
Yes, it's quite an experience. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little reason why I ended up doing the kind of stuff I do. And by the way, here's my wife here at the recent eclipse down in Chile. And this is her, what she likes to do is to make a pinhole projection pattern. And in this case, so it's projecting a pattern that she designed in this cutout here. And we've got a small little telescope here projecting the larger image there. So I wanted to mention her because, we kind of travel as a team, and it's really essential to have somebody that you're traveling with because there's way too much luggage for one person to handle. And even for mundane things like, waiting with the luggage while the other person goes to the restroom and so on, it makes it a lot more convenient. So I was born in Maui, Hawaii here, and I was born and raised there. And then I attended high school on Oahu. It was a boarding high school, great time to get away from the parents. And then I came to Southern California for college and stayed for work just because of the technical opportunities out here. I went into engineering. I got a degree in physics, but I ended up working in computers and equipment like that. The travel I did was for work, for my wife's sport, Kendall. But we also travel specifically for astronomy and landscape photography and seeing, unusual geology. Iceland's a great place for that kind of stuff. My first international trip was back in 1967, and it was with my family, and it was when I got my first telescope. I actually got an equatorial motorized telescope for astrophotography way back then. And as far as states and countries, I don't know how many I actually have been to. I don't have a checklist that I'm working on or anything like that. So I put some pins in where these are not one per country, but basically cities or interesting places that we've done something at. So we've covered a lot of places in the world, as you can see here. And when I wanted to talk about...
Dave?
Yes.
What are the reds and the blue?
Oh, sorry. Let me get back to that. Yeah, so the reds are where I've seen a total solar eclipse. The blues are just places we've been to, other kind of interests. The yellows here were for partial or annular solar eclipses. The greens are observatories I've visited. So you can see, like, I've been to Yerkes and other big observatories. And visiting those observatories was never a goal, but it just happened to be like, we're on an astronomy trip. Here's an interesting observatory. Let's go and visit. And if you're on a eclipse trip, oftentimes the tour company itself will realize that, if they can arrange a tour of an observatory, that'd be of interest to all of the attendees. Let's see, this one gray one, which is in Hawaii, was where I failed to see an eclipse. That was the 1991 eclipse. We're completely clouded out. Okay, so generally, the considerations for astronomy are, of course, obvious, not near population centers, because you have not just light pollution, you have air pollution that causes scattering, and you have air traffic. I don't like the tropics because of the heat, the humidity, insects, and diseases. Mountains are great for clear air, but sometimes you have problems getting to the top. The altitude can affect some people. I've been okay with that, but it can be bad. Of course, it's cold, and you possibly have unstable air. Islands are mostly too low, too humid, and often with salt-laden air blowing through that coats optics, and if you're there for a long time, it'll actually rust a lot of things. I like high deserts. It's kind of a compromise of conditions, but you can have potential dust problems. And of course, the big problem is political stability. And that doesn't just mean a government like Libya, but it also means, like on the big island of Hawaii, it's not politically stable. You can't just go up there and do observing because there are a bunch of people protesting and police and extremely limited access to the top right now. And so I wanted to talk about a lot of these areas in general. I will go into Hawaii and Easter Island in detail. And of course, in North America, it's pretty, I think most people are familiar that the prime seeing is usually in the Southwest United States. And up here, you can have pretty dark areas too. But of course, on the East Coast, there's there's a great deal of humidity and bad weather and light pollution. The light pollution map looks really discouraging when you look at the eastern United States. In Asia, now remember, these are kind of my sampling of these areas, and I've not been everywhere, and I don't go there every time. So, you know, these are kind of one-shot samples. In China and Taiwan and Korea and Japan, it's really unfavorable for photography, in my opinion. It's hot and humid. The most of the world's population seems to live in those areas. So, and it's extremely dense population. Out in Mongolia, it's wide open, but I found the conditions a little bit hazy a lot of the time. And on the Tibetan plateau, it's nice, but again, you can have a lot of hazy conditions. Okay, South America. So in South America, I've been to Argentina, the east coast side of South America, Brazil, Argentina, and these areas tend to be extremely cloudy, in my opinion. I've actually just maybe seen the moon once from those areas. They're so cloudy. If you go down to the tip, the weather is extremely variable. It can be bright and sunny in the morning and snowing in the afternoon. That's pretty common, and very high wind. This side of South America is very favorable, and I'll talk in more detail there too. Europe. Let's see. So again, Europe is highly developed, and in my opinion, very hard to find a place to observe. There may be nice parks and things that locals know about. And if anybody listens to this and wants to recommend someplace, that'd be great. I'd love to find out where things are that are good for astrophotography. I know the Canary Islands are good, and I haven't gotten there, but one of these days, hopefully I'll get there. Africa, I'll just go through all of those. Africa, Australia. So Africa, I've been to Northern Africa. I saw the 2006 eclipse from Northern Africa, and I did some work for a seismic instrumentation company. So I've been to the Lake Nasser and the Aswan Dam down here, and also took the opportunity to go up the Nile. Very dusty here, very, very dusty. And out in Libya, we actually had fog come in and cover our eclipse site until it burned off maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, and a few hours later, the eclipse happened. But I was kind of surprised to find that we were under fog for part of the way. South Africa, the southern part of Africa on the west side seems to be very nice. It's high desert, essentially. And my favorite spot is in a place in Namibia, which I'll talk about more here at this green diamond. Australia, I've been basically on the east coast of Australia, which I didn't spend enough time to really get a good feel for it, but it seems humid and cloudy, and the southern part is, has a lot of variable weather because it's down south where the weather tends to be pretty bad. Central Australia, this is where Ayers Rock is, nice and dry and clear. I could see the Magellanic Clouds, but so many bugs, my God. It may have been just the time of the year, but it wasn't encouraging to me to do photography out there. And finally, way down at the bottom, we did go to the Antarctic Peninsula. The weather is horrible, and you can only go during the Antarctic summer. So you're going to get very few hours of dark time if that's what you want. Okay, so that's the general gist of things. So a few places I wanted to talk about in depth was, and because I'm from Hawaii, I think I can speak pretty authoritatively about that. And you may want to go to Hawaii sometime and do some imaging. So I wanted to mention this. So as you know, this is the Hawaiian chain. But in my opinion, there are only 3 good locations in Hawaii to do any astrophotography other than casual landscape, and constellation photography. And that's because they're all above 10,000 feet high. That's Haleakala here, and then 2 mountains on the big island of Hawaii down here. Mauna Kea, where most of the professional telescopes are, and Mauna Loa, which is also used, but not so much also. I'm not exactly sure why. So Haleakala, the reason why I say there are only 3 good locations is because you can see in this shot, this cloud layer here. These clouds come zipping by at about, say, 7,000 to 9,000 feet. So if you're above it, you're likely to be clear. You can't have high cirrus cloud, but this is the main problem for imaging from a low elevation. And these are not clouds generally that will hang around all night, but they're blowing through. So it's really hard to get any decent length of exposure. So this arrow here indicates from Kahului, where that's where the airport is located at sea level, and you're looking towards Haleakala, this is what you'll see. And right at the top here, you can see some observatories. There's solar observatory and a lot of military-based satellite tracking and things like that. The other end of the arrow looking back towards the West Maui area, which is this set of volcanoes here, is kind of bad from the light pollution standpoint. So here's the glow of Kahului, and then on the other side of the island, this strip of light pollution is because the tourists all tend to want to be on the dry side of the island. So on Maui, that's on this side here. Now, the good thing is that from Kahului, you can drive up to Haleakala in about an hour and a half. The road is so good now that you can take buses up there, and they do. It's a national park up there, and so you can go up there 24/7. There is a fee. I think it's something like $20 for 5 days or something per vehicle. If you have a national park pass, it's good there. So, you don't have to pay any extra if you have that. The very top where the observatories are located are restricted. So, but there are other peaks that you can be on. It's a very broad area. The bad part is that, as you might know, there's a trade wind that comes from the northeast, and that's why this side of the islands are all green. Well, you can still feel it up here, and so you may have a constant 5 to 10 mile an hour wind. That's typically at night you're going to be at that altitude is going to be 50 degrees Fahrenheit or maybe even lower. So even though you're on a tropical island, you need kind of a cold weather gear. Here's the light pollution. Oahu is where most of the people in Hawaii live. There's about 1 million people living here, and it shows from the light pollution. And the problem with all these other islands is they don't have high mountains. Some mountains are decently high, but they're inaccessible. So, they're not very useful in that respect. On Maui, again, Kahului, the city there, has a lot of light pollution, and so do the tourist areas. That's what we were seeing in the previous pictures. On the big island, again, on this side of the island, the leeward side, that's where all the tourists are, and the hotels and other things that cause light pollution. The city here, Hilo, is this little spot here, is relatively a small population, so there's not too much light pollution. And this light pollution map, I think, is outdated because this spot here is actually the volcano, which has stopped erupting for the moment. So Mauna Kea is located, around here. So this is what it looks like at the top of Mauna Kea. This is a panoramic view showing all of the observatories up there. And let me go to this. So this was a first quarter moon situation, but because of the transparency of the air, you can see the Milky Way and other features. It wasn't completely clear either, but that's when we were able to get there. So this is at nearly 13,000 feet. And there's one of the Keck telescopes with its laser, and it's targeting the center of our galaxy there with adaptive optics. Easter Island. This is another place that we went to for an eclipse. So Easter Island is this little spot in the middle of nowhere. One single island with relatively low volcanoes at each of the three corners there. The only reason why Easter Island is accessible is that it has a nice long airport here, landing strip. And my understanding is that it was funded by the US government as an emergency space shuttle landing site. So this is a relatively small island. We stayed there for over a week and did a lot of hiking to all the corners of the island. In case you're curious, here's where the statues are quarried, and a lot of remaining statues are in this area. So you can see people looking at them down there. But it is a low island, so the weather is quite bad. And this picture of the end of the eclipse illustrates how lucky we were, because actually on this morning, it was raining cats and dogs at dawn, and I was setting up optimistically still in drizzle. And it did clear out, however. We did see the eclipse. It was really great. And then immediately clouds drifted across the sun. And this is, oops. Of course, you can see the southern skies from here, but you can see from the clouds what it looked like on a typical night out there. So in that sense, it was kind of discouraging on this trip. Are we still in sync here?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay. So here's the sunset on the day of the eclipse. This is the only sunset we saw in a week because of the clouds. Now, I also wanted to talk about our the Orange County Astronomers observing site. And as I mentioned before, it's a 20-acre site and it's very nice. We have a lot of private observatories there. We're in a linear distance. We're about 10 miles from Palomar, but we're on a different ridge and we're lower down. We're at 4,300 feet. Our seeing is typically 2 to 3 arc seconds. This past weekend, it was pretty windy and bad, so we were at 4 to 5 arc seconds. Generally speaking, our winds subside at sunset. So in that sense, it's very nice too. We do, however, have a lot of air traffic, as you can see here. This is just a couple of hours, but all of the LAX transcontinental stuff flies by us. Sometimes we have the marine layer that comes in and covers up the cities. And so, then we will have pretty decent Milky Way nights. This shot here is one of these tiny planet shots I did out of my observatory. So you can see starting from the south, heading towards the west, we have a light dome from San Diego. And then towards the west, we have the local city of Temecula and then Los Angeles. And then heading around here, we start to see the Palm Springs light dome. So really the best quadrant is towards the southeast. And here's another panoramic view out. It's the same shot that I used for the tiny planet shot. So here's the start of the rising Milky Way. Oops. Okay, going out to some higher elevations. In 2016, I went on a trip to Peru, and we went to Lake Titicaca, which is at 12,000 feet. I was hoping to do a lot of astrophotography, but found out, at least on the Peruvian side, the light pollution is horrible. There's a huge population out there. Even though you're at 12,000 feet, I guess because of the size of the lake, we had a lot of humidity. We had afternoon thunderstorms, lightning storms even. It's the first time I heard the crackle of static electricity before a lightning bolt hit. Let's see if I can go back here. Oops. So this is where Lake Titicaca is. I understand the Southern Sky Star Party is held somewhere on the Bolivian side, and it could be that it's quite a lot darker there. But unfortunately, you might have heard in the news, Bolivia basically had a coup, and the president had to go seek asylum in some other country. It's a little bit not stable right now. In Tibet, we were staying at the Rongbuk Monastery, which is at 16,350 feet. So again, this was after an eclipse, so this is approaching first quarter moon. You can still see the Milky Way, so you know that it's pretty transparent air there. But you do have problems with clouds. We were told we were pretty lucky to see Mount Everest. This is the north face of Everest, which is the opposite side from that you normally see in pictures. on our recent trip down to Chile, Chile has a lot of astronomy awareness because of all the observatories there. The public has a lot of opportunities to go to these public observatories, which are kind of like LA's local Griffith Observatory. They do a lot of public outreach. So this is one of those observatories. But all of these places are really oriented towards visual observers. There are very few places oriented towards imagers. So you kind of have to, make do with whatever you got. It was clear enough to see. You can see the Magellanic Clouds here, and then Eta Carina. The South Pole is somewhere around here. It's very difficult to set up there because basically I just don't try to find the star patterns. I just do a drift alignment immediately. And in northern Chile, let me go back here. So the eclipse and a lot of the observatories you've heard of are down here. Down here is where Santiago, Chile is, and up here is where the bottom end of the Atacama Desert is located, and that's where a lot of the traditional observatories have been located. And the eclipse path actually went through here, so we got a chance to visit quite a number of public observatories as well as a professional observatory there. However, as I said, we extended our trip, and then we went to the northern part here. And you may have heard of the ALMA array, and that's up in this area here. So this upper shot here shows the ALMA array. It's at 16,000, I forget, 800 feet, something like that. But there's also a Simons Observatory in this shot down here, which is at just about 17,000 feet. This most of these facilities are built as cooperative efforts with a lot of universities, but this one is operated or administered by the UC California, San Diego. There's an organization there called the Center for Astrophysics and Space Science. And so what both places are doing is they're operating near in the millimeter and submillimeter range of frequencies where it's it's kind of on the borderline between infrared and radio waves. So they have very specific instrumentation, and they need to get as high above the water vapor as possible. So in the case of the Simons Observatory, they're trying to look at so far deep into the Big Bang that at the point where photons could escape from the density of the initial Big Bang. So the Simons Observatory is here. The ALMA is in this kind of a flat area here. The place you stay at is at about 8,000 feet in San Pedro de Atacama. And there's a very nice paved highway that goes here and then continues on to the border with Argentina and branches off into Bolivia also. But right here, there's a fairly nice dirt road that you go on, and you can navigate it with Google Maps. And then you end up at the front door of the Simons Observatory. It's not a private road or anything because near the Simons Observatory is where trail starts for this local peak, Cerro Toco, which is 18,400 feet. It's supposed to be one of the easiest climbs at that altitude, for the volcanoes in the Andes. That is, for that reason, because of access to that trail, you can just go right up to the Simons Observatory, and they have a lot of flat spaces. You can set up a telescope if that's what you want to do. In both the cases of these observatories, in order to get a formal tour, a guided tour by somebody to look at the equipment, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. You have to actually get a physical and have a doctor's certification that you're not going to die when you're at that altitude. I found out about that too late, so we satisfied ourselves with just driving up to the Simons when no one was there, and then do some photography back then at that time. Let me go back a slide. Oops. So we stayed in the evening to get some shots. Again, after the eclipse, the moon is out, but you can see at that altitude, you get clarity, even though you do have some high clouds on this night. You can see the Magellanic Clouds there. And there's the observatory facilities itself, and the roughly first quarter moon there. Back down in San Pedro de Atacama, they have a lot of observing facilities. So this one is called the Atacama Lodge, which is outside the city of San Pedro, which is a small town anyway. So there's not much light pollution, except that these so-called astronomy-oriented places are, again, oriented towards visual astronomy. So even though there's plenty of room and I could set up here and take pictures for multiple nights, the thing that was bad about this place is that they make their money there by hosting star parties on the new moon, well, close to the new moon. And they actually have busloads of tourists come in. The buses have, their lights low, but still they're stirring up dust and their lights still interfere with things. And so it's not a very good place to do if you're trying to do astrophotography.
It wasn't so bad.
Oh, you've been there. Okay.
Yeah, I was there this summer for the solar eclipse.
Ah, okay.
You kind of set up further back from where they're from where the tour groups come, and I had a great time there.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say it's totally disappointing, but I was kind of surprised at the amount of dust that was raised and the appearance. So now this, I'm going to end on this, but this is my favorite place. I haven't been there since 2004. We went here after the Venus transit, which we saw from Zambia. And this place is the darkest place I've ever seen anywhere. It's because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, yet it is accessible, which is great. I hope to go back next year with some friends, and I'll see if anything's changed. Hopefully they haven't expanded too much. So this is Tivoli Farm. This is actually a farm where they actually raise grazing animals, mostly sheep, in this huge area back here. But all of the horizons in every direction are flat like this, and you're elevated at something like 4,000 feet. You're on the edge of the desert out there. And this is the location in Namibia. It's not too far from Windhoek, which is the capital, but the light dome is not visible. There are no light domes visible at all from this location. And so that's where I took this panoramic or stitched panorama. Let's see. So these are other shots I took. I was there for a week, and every single night was clear. The place is run by a German couple, a German ancestry couple who still speak German and have relatives in Germany, because the area used to be, I guess, part of a German colony. And so there are many German descendants there. And a lot of German astronomers actually fly down from Germany every year. It's actually relatively hard to get a reservation there. Let me see. Okay, so international travelers will know these, but if you haven't traveled yet, these are my recommendations. Plan your trip so you, especially for an eclipse trip or some fixed event, plan trips so you arrive early by at least a day, if not more, because if you're delayed for some reason getting out of your, flying over, you can, the dominoes will fall all the way along your trip. You're going to try and catch up with your group, and you'll be missing a lot of things. I try to minimize plane changes, because every time you change a plane, the possibility is that you're going to lose your luggage. I minimize stops in airports known for weather delays. So, for example, we went to Iceland in February. Well, the normal path from LA would be to go through Chicago and New York, but that seems crazy to me. So we found out that Icelandic Airlines flies into Orlando. So we flew to Orlando and took a plane flight from Orlando to Iceland. Of course, we all know we have to hand carry our cameras and optics. And batteries these days have to be hand carried because of the fire hazard. And be sure to board your flight early, because everybody's trying to get all that hand carry baggage space, storage space above you. And if you're the last guy on, you're going to be forced to put your hand carry baggage through the luggage also. And get trip insurance, because there are many places where, it's going to be bad news to get sick or hurt in, and you want to have medical evacuation coverage if possible. Currency, what they take as a fee varies and can be quite a lot, so you need to check that. If you can carry US dollars or euros as the bulk of your currency, but people aren't going to take it unless they're crisp new notes, and you should not be carrying old $100 bill designs or anything like that, or you'll have trouble with that. If you're planning to use automated tellers, be sure to check with your bank that your card will work. I actually had to change my PIN down to 4 digits to ensure that on my last trip to Chile that it would work. And be careful, where inflation is going crazy, you may not want to change anything to the local currency, because they may be happy to just directly take dollars or euros. And here's a worst case scenario in Zimbabwe. We did not go there, but it reached such a bad level of inflation that this is a $100 trillion bill, if you can see that. For communications, check your cell phone for international coverage. I use Google Fi, which also it uses T-Mobile as one of its services, and that allows me to have no extra charge for data in foreign countries, most foreign countries. If necessary, then you should buy a local cell phone or a SIM card on arrival at the location in order to use the local phones. Yeah. Because data could cost you more money and you don't know how fast the coverage will be, you should cache any Google Maps or things you're depending on at home or at the hotel if they offer Wi-Fi. And this is something for the modern age. Don't publicly tweet or blog your location during the trip because burglars will be following you too. And I always carry paper documents as a backup because it's too easy to just lose a phone or have your phone, out of battery power when you need to show somebody a document. For luggage, you have to strictly observe baggage weight restrictions these days. 1 pound over might mean you're, in the middle of the floor trying to resort your equipment so that it goes under the weight restriction. Mark your bag with unique markers for quick retrieval. It's amazing how many Pelican lookalikes there are these days. Cushion your equipment with clothing and not packing foam because every cubic inch is valuable. And plus, the more clothing you pack in there, the less laundry you have to do. Be careful of real Pelican cases. They're so heavy that you could use up half the weight just in the case itself. As I mentioned earlier, travel with at least one other person to simplify baggage management. And consider, like if you're going on an eclipse or something like that, you may have to hand carry your astronomy equipment to the observing site. That has happened to me. And so, it was quite a pain, and it's a really good incentive to have your equipment light. And just remember, the wheels on suitcases don't work on sand, gravel, or cobblestone. And I always use a day pack or backpack so that I can have a lot of stuff back there, but still have my hands free. This is an example of the extreme measure I did on my Chile trip to take a GM8, which is kind of a heavy mount, but I wanted to make sure I had enough stability for the eclipse and then for nighttime observing later on. So this stuff here is the stuff that I took off the standard mount. So this, I did not weigh it, but it is a lot of weight. And so what I've substituted as counterweight are a pair of lithium-ion batteries here. And then I made my own tripod out of pieces of standard size wood. And the reason I did that is to make it easy enough that I don't mind just throwing this away before coming back from the trip. A friend of mine made this substitution for the Los Mandi cup here. And he did that on an NC router. So it's great with new technology. High altitude, of course, you shouldn't do it if you have known health problems. And if you're not sure, you really ought to go to the doctor and have yourself checked out. And then go to local high mountains before you commit to a big trip if you're not sure that you can adjust. Standard procedure is to adjust to altitude gradually, if at all possible, and to arrange your itinerary so that you're gradually ascending in altitude. An example where it's hard to compromise sometimes. So if you want to go to Machu Picchu or Lake Titicaca in Peru at high altitude, unfortunately, you fly from Lima at sea level to a city called Cusco, and you're immediately at 11,000 feet. So that makes a lot of people sick. So we actually had a tour where as soon as you fly into Cusco at 11,000 feet, they put you on a bus and you descend into the valley at about 7,000 feet, and you can adjust more gradually. Also keep hydrated, and of course, don't overexert at high altitude. But remember that you may have to carry your equipment, so you have to be aware of that. Here's some communication stuff. I use my cell phone, Google Fi. I have an emergency solar panel with a battery here for communications equipment. This little thing here allows you to point the sun at the sun and get the most out of the charging. This is a new development which I really like. It's a Garmin GPS receiver and Iridium satellite communicator. It does two-way texting, and it has an emergency, essentially a 911 button that sends both the location and a pre-canned text message to these guys, to the service guys. And if you just have this, you can send one of three pre-canned text messages, which you set up on the website before you leave. If you have your phone available, you can tether by Bluetooth and then make messages as you normally would, and then send it via Iridium to another cell phone, like an ordinary text message. And what the person on the other end receives is your message plus a link to the Garmin site, which brings up a map and shows them exactly where you are. So if you have somebody that you want to keep appraised of your progress during your trip, this is a great way to do it. This is not very expensive. It costs, I think I got it on sale at REI for $300, which is, typical for a cell phone level stuff. And let's see. Oh, the service costs $25 a year just to activate this thing. And then I paid $50 for 1 month of unlimited texting, which is pretty reasonable. It's like a cell phone plan. And you can turn off the that part of the plan, the $50 per month part, turn it off when you don't need it and turn it back on when you do need it. So a great way to stay safe. And so wrapping up, here's my note on luggage. So with my wife and myself, we pretty much max out the check-ins, 2 each at 50 pounds max each. We take 2 day packs to stuff as much other stuff into it, and then 2 camera bags. My telescope breaks down into pieces, so I actually carry everything here in my backpack. The mount is actually I have a clone Pelican case here. The GM8 was in there. And so that's it. And I'd be interested to hear from other people who like to go traveling if you have recommendations and other places to visit.
Thank you very much, Dave. You've gotten a few comments there that you are very, very knowledgeable, and that you must now go ahead and write a book. Okay. That's Eric. Were you facing? Are there some issues or questions we need asked out of that?
Well, there's lots of crosstalk commentary over on the YouTube site, but I didn't see any questions really asked Dave. He seems to have covered just about everything.
So a couple people did ask some questions, but we knew you'd get to them eventually, so we just kind of held off on that. And yeah, you did cover. I think everything has been asked.
Okay,
that's cool.
Just maybe a plug for next week or a follow on, because it fits very well with this one.
Yeah, John. Yeah, I was going to say something about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so next week I'll be doing a presentation on mobile imaging setups. What, I think it was maybe called an ideal mobile imaging setup, but I'll be covering a lot of, I guess, the decisions for the type of gear that you want to use for mobile imaging. Now, this is probably more for maybe traditional astrophotography, which is a little bit less what was covered tonight, but just ways to make your selections on your gear and pack in a way that it's easy to travel with your gear. And I've spent probably the last 4 or 5 years trying to come up with what I think is the ideal travel setup. And so we'll go through each of the different selection criteria between computers and cameras, mounts, and all that stuff. So it'll follow on very well from this week's presentation too, for anybody who has additional questions on that.
Yeah, great. So I can cancel that. I was going to make a big note of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Is there anything more we need to talk about, Dave? Anything else? We want to really appreciate you. I mean, you really impress some people there. You can read the comments as you, when you get a chance.
Well, I hope it's useful and encourages people to get
Yeah.
out to dark places.
Yeah, I travel a lot, but I don't travel to take pictures, generally speaking, to take astrophotos. I've done it a few times, but you do learn a lot. And you and I have a different philosophy of travel. I think we talked about that up at Big Bear.
Well, you should talk about it sometime.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm not sure that many people really want to travel the way I travel like that. But it's fun. I know a lot of the things you've talked about. I'm sitting here with I don't know if you can see it, my 20 billion, is it? 2 billion, whatever, $20 billion bill from Zimbabwe, which I bought in someplace in Zambia.
I think it ended up final exchange rate of $25 quadrillion to $1
Really?
US.
Yeah, this is the biggest bill I could find, so I've still got it around. It sits in my desk drawer. So, okay, as you've already heard, Josh is coming in next week, and then the week after that, I think Bob Denny's going to tell us a little bit more about alpaca and how that's going. And Bob has promised to come back again later. We are pretty well into January with our scheduling. We always would like to have more people come along if we can get more people to volunteer like Dave did today. Please do. We want to hear from you. There was a question there about how we did. Did we show the picture of us, the 4 of us at the AIC at the beginning of the show, Tolga?
Yes, I think we did.
Okay.
Eric, if
In
you can put it up, I'll show it again.
Yeah. Okay. In general, we did great. We ran into each other there, and of course, on behalf of all 4 of us, because I know you guys were doing it. We're. It was really nice to have you come up and say hey, and just thank us for what we do. It is a labor of love, but it is a labor, and we could use your help. People volunteering. We enjoy doing this show. We don't do it so that you'll come up to us at AIC or wherever it is that you see us and say, hey, aren't you from the Astro Imaging channel? But when you do and you show your appreciation, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us, although you can all unmute your mics and add to that. But those of you who came up, we got a couple of people that volunteered to do something as a result of the show. And of course, Tolga, especially because he's so good at this, was twisting a few arms to get people to come. And so we will probably have a full show for well into February, just based on what we've done. We haven't scheduled them up yet because it takes a while to get everything put together. Want to thank you and wish you all a happy Thanksgiving this next week, wherever you are. If you're in some other foreign country, I'm sure you have a fall festival, and good luck to you too. Thank you very much for being here today, Dave. And I think we're ready to go. We ready to go, Tolga? Everybody?
Yes, we are. Good night,
Okay.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.